Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Murphy with MomComplicated.com, and I am also the co-founder of NC Blogger Network, our gracious hosts for the show. Our gal pal, Allison Carter, could not make it tonight, but in case you're wondering where you are and who you're watching, this is Blogging411. We join you every Wednesday night for 30 minutes at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about blogging. I'm going to throw it over to my co-host, Randy Brown.
Hello, I'm Randy. I'm a blogger and a webmaster. Been a webmaster for several years. I also run iHelpers.net, where we can get your blog online quickly and inexpensively. So what are we talking about tonight?
We're talking about a common issue that we have seen around the interwebs, and that is watching people chase their stats and let the stats run where they're going with their blog. You know, everyone starts a blog for a reason. They might have a platform they want to talk about. They have a vision, you know, they have something that they're really interested in talking, like a hobby, or they just want to have a lifestyle blog, or they just want to get their thoughts out on the internet. Whatever it is, there was an original goal. And then you do it for a couple months, and then you hear that you need to put, start analyzing what you're doing, so you install something like Google Analytics. And it's true, you do need to measure what you're doing if you want to improve. You need to know where you are, where you've been, where you're going, so that you have a purpose. But there's a very fine line that you need to walk between knowing what's working for you and letting those numbers run what you're doing. So, Randy, you're very, very experienced, and I always learn a lot from you. And I wanted to know kind of what you thought were some of the key stats that really you should, pay attention to. If you could pick one or two or even three, what would you tell people what you watch? Like, what are the first couple of numbers that you watch every day?
Well, first I would tell everybody that what I watch may not be what you need to watch, because you might have different goals and different reasons for being online. So there is no right or wrong answer. It depends. You need to think about why you're online and what your goals are. So to me, what's important for most of my websites is number of visitors and page views. Both of those I kind of look at together. Less visitors but more page views is okay. I'd rather have a lot of visitors and a lot of page views. So those are important to me. I think they're both important, again, depending on what your goals are. Sometimes I'll also look at, it sort of ties in with the page views, which is the number of page views per visit. Again, if you've got, you want your people to come and look at all your pages, browse around your site, and a higher percentage of page views or a lower percentage of bounces, which is people that just look at one page and then go away. The better those numbers, I think Google tends to favor those websites, because it sort of tells Google, it gives it a signal that people actually enjoy your stuff. So that's what I tend to look at.
Okay, so in there, so a bounce rate, what would you say is a decent bounce rate? And I know that you're probably going to say that it depends on what kind of website you have as well. But let's say for like a lifestyle blogger, somebody that's just talking about their experiences and to-dos and that kind of stuff, like what would their goal be?
Zero bounce rate. That's the goal. Now I've seen, and you'll never hit that.
Okay, good. I was going to say mine's very far from zero.
Yeah, one of my best, highest, my website that gets 10,000 or so hits per day, the bounce rate is relatively high. It's 80 to 90%. It's just always been that high. Mm-hmm. Some of my other websites, it's 40, 50%. It's a lot better, but I don't get as much traffic on that website. So, and I've got other websites that are all over, but not much better than 50% or so. So the lower the better. There's tricks and things you can do to try to increase the bounce rate, but then there's a line. You have to walk, because you might have been to some websites where you go, and they've got a single article broken down into 46 different pages. You read
Oh.
almost one or two sentences. Some of the news sites or tech sites do this, and so there's a line where you go from, people are looking at more pages because it's interesting versus they're looking at more pages because you force them and twist their arm to make them do it, and that's just annoying. I hate that, and I've gotten to a point now where when I go to one of those tech websites where it's read section 1, read section 2, and it's a new page and a new pop-up ad every time, I don't ever go back. I hate that, and I think that in the long run, practices like that will backfire because I'll never go back to those websites, and if we all rise up and revolt, none of us should. So there's a line where you want to have links to other pages, and if you have a really long article, thousands of words, maybe you break that up into a couple of pages. But you read all these experts telling us that we have to reduce our bounce rate by breaking up our articles into 64 different pages and sections, and you get caught up in this, and then you just kind of forget about what's important, which is the people that are coming to read your website. You don't want to piss them off because they will revolt also eventually, hopefully.
I actually had an experience like that just today, and it was killing me. The website looked reputable. She was linking to other websites that I know are reputable. They did a joint project, and I really, really wanted to get to the project, and I had to click. I had 5 tabs open, and I still couldn't figure out where to get the information she was talking about. It was killing me. And so I just dropped it, and I said, I guess I'm just not going to.
You went further than I would have. I would have stopped after 2 or 3. If I have to fight my way around a website to find why you told me to come to your website, I'm not going to stick around. And I think most people, after being tricked like that a few times, they're not going to want to do it either. So when you listen to the experts, don't ever forget about your visitors, because the experts are going to tell you to do. Some of the experts will tell you to do that crap, and it gets annoying. So you have to know where that line is. You have to know where that line is.
Right, and then I guess it always comes back to thinking about your readers and what they came to find out. And there's no harm in talking about something and saying, speaking of when I went to the pool, I wrote an article about that, and you link to that article because it's relevant to what you're talking about, and it enhances the story. That's very different than what we're talking about, where you're breaking up your story into different pages in order to get more clicks. So, but yeah, thinking about your user is definitely. And then I've seen this, and I've actually fallen into this trap, where on Google Analytics, if you go under Audience and then Acquisition and Social, you can get to landing pages. And I bet a more experienced person like Randy could actually tell us how to create a short link so we don't have to click 5 different times to get to that. But that landing pages area is all of your pages in your website, and it'll show you how popular your blog posts are, and it'll kind of break it out for you and rank them. So you can look, you can set the date ranges and see like how popular it was that month, and then at the end of the year you can kind of see all of your posts and how popular they were at the for the year. And that's going to be a really important thing you want to do for your planning for next year, 2015. You want to do that at the end of December. But using that information and saying, I am, for our mommy blog, we talk about making things less complicated, breaking it down and making it as easy as possible. And, all of a sudden our asparagus posts are doing really good, and we go, oh my gosh, we need to write everything about asparagus. Like, we're going to learn, we're going to write about how to grow it and where to buy it and how to cook it and how to freeze it. But that doesn't really run true with our main mission. You could say a couple of those posts would be relevant because we do talk about cooking if we had an easy recipe for that. But in the long run, were we setting out to be asparagus, experts? And I think that's where I would say maybe a newbie, or even I don't know if you've seen it with experienced bloggers, where that's an example of letting your stats run what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, you never want to get so far off track following your stats that you forget why you're there to begin with. Now that doing what you just described is actually one of my tactics that's worked very well at one of my websites. But so I'll write a post about whatever, fixing your iPhone, and or something, and it does very well. Well, then what I'll tend to do is go and write more posts about that and kind of get more of that Google momentum rolling. But once you get into, if I post one is about fixing your iPhone, and then the next one is about fixing your Android, and then the next one is about fixing your transmission, and then the next one is about fixing your motorcycle cable. If you go too far off of, of what your website is about, well, now that's not what your website is about anymore. So you just on the website I'm talking about, that it's got a broad range of technology subjects, so that works. If you're about mommy blogging, you can talk about cooking asparagus because that's what mommies do, but you don't want to go off track about growing and farming asparagus and the best way to fertilize asparagus in your crops, because that's what does well. Because that, you're going to have to decide: do you want to be a mommy blogger or do you want to be a asparagus farmer blogger? You just have to keep that in mind. You always have to get back to, or what I do is, and I've gone off track like that, so I have to remember to come back to, what is this website about? What is this blog about? And what do I want people to come for? Maybe I need to go and start another website or blog about asparagus farming. If that does well, that's fine, but don't forget about what your original blog is there for, and why you're there, and why you want people to come.
Oh, I totally agree. And so that's a perfect example. My sister Vanessa loves researching things. Like, it is her happy place. Like, I love organizing. She loves researching. She could research all day and be totally fine with it. So when we started homeschooling, we had to be very conscious that on our main site, we would obviously include the topic of homeschooling because it was about us, and those were things that we could talk about as far as, not overcomplicating the situations. But we were finding all of these resources for homeschooling, and we had to make a decision to start a separate website for these resources that we were finding, because we were finding enough, and that she was doing it often enough that it was going to fuel that second website. And so that's what we had to do. And so now we have two websites, in which we never would have thought about, but this second website is very specific to, this one, they're homeschool printables. So anything that you can print off your printer and use as an educational piece. And so that's pretty specific.
Now, the opposite side of that is that maybe, as you create your blog, maybe you're smart enough to think about this ahead of time. I'm not usually. But maybe your blog, or your website, when you first create it, is of such a wide subject base that you could include them both in one website. When I created that first website of mine, the subject base was very narrow, and I realized that I had to expand that subject. It was technology based, but I realized I really had to open it up, and it made sense, and it still stayed within the original context of the website, so it wasn't totally stupid. So, but if you think ahead of that, if you think ahead, where I'm going to make a website for mommy bloggers and asparagus farmers, if you can pull that off, you're a lot smarter than I am. But maybe it's about mommy bloggers and whatever else mommies do, and a few subjects along those lines. So you can go either way. You can make a broad subject website, or have more than one very narrow subject niche type websites.
Yeah, I totally agree. So now, again, with stats, is there something that you feel like people will mention, or the experts talk about a lot, where you're going, oh, that doesn't really matter? Like, the whole topic of social media marketing, everyone's like, oh my God, you have to have it, and you've been very successful without it. So Is there any, kind of stat or practice when you're measuring your success that people are always constantly saying you must do this or you have to pay attention to this, and you're like, meh, doesn't matter?
Yeah, there's a lot of those. Another thing you have to remember, especially if you're new, is that as you're, and I did this at the beginning. I started listening to all the big bloggers, all the big webmasters, and
Right.
there's two groups of those, and one group is much larger than the other group. There's the ones that are writing about being a blogger and blogging about being a blogger and how to be a successful blogger, and then there's the ones that are out there actually doing it. And they're two different groups of people, and the ones that are writing about it, their job is to write about it, and so they're always spewing out the top 10 this, or the best, you can't live without this or without that, and it almost gets to a point where you're getting flooded with all these things that you must do, these top 10 things that you must do,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to. I just stopped listening to them because I do. They don't always apply. I don't want to say I don't do any of those things, but a lot of those things I've never done. If you listed all the things I haven't done or stopped doing, I could write top 10 lists of what you should never do, or the things that you must do that I never did. You just have to remember what your goal is, and is what this expert is writing about. Is, one, does he know what he's talking about, and two, why is he posting it? Is he posting it so that you'll come and read his blog and get more clicks on it, or more views for his advertisers? And does it apply to your blog or your website? So on one of my websites, I went for a long time without really getting into any social media. It worked great. It didn't matter. My newest website is doing very well with social media. And there's just, not all of those must-do things you must do, I guess. And it's difficult to find which ones and you should and you shouldn't do, and sometimes it's just by trial and error.
So what do you say to the blogger, because we met a couple of these at our launch event, who are new, and they kind of look defeated when you say, well, it depends on your goals? Because I feel like some bloggers are like, my goal is just to get somebody to read it. Like, my goal is for somebody to know I'm blogging. And so what do you say to those people when they're getting, 10 people a month or what, what, I don't know how low is, but, what do you say to them? Like, how do they figure out what their goal is and use this information to help them when they're brand new and they just frankly want somebody to figure out that they're actually blogging?
Well, if that's their only goal, they just want people to know that they're there.
That would be goal one, right?
Yeah, that's fine to have as a goal. So to them, I would say, okay, so you need to know, are you getting any viewers or not? So you need to be able to measure it. So I would get some analytics on there and start looking at visitors per day. That's a basic, simple, easy thing to do. And then maybe try some other thing. Well, so the first thing is you got to write a lot of good content that's going to make people want to come and read it. So it's got to be good, my old line that I say almost every show, good, original, quality content. And you got to keep, I don't want to say spewing it out, but you got to keep generating that good content, because if there's nothing there for people to come and look at, they're not going to come, or they're not going to come back. And then try a few things. Go on social media, get on Facebook or Twitter or in Pinterest or all of them, and start sharing and pinning and tweeting and twerping and all those things that you do, and then go back and look at those stats and see, okay, where are the people coming from? Where am I getting the engagement? So I've gone through this with my newest website, where I got on Pinterest, thanks to you, and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And after a few months, I go and I look and I say, okay, now what's working? So I'm getting a lot of engagement on Instagram. A lot of people are liking my photos and stuff, but they're not coming to the website. So that's, my goal is to get people over there, not to say that they like the picture I post on Instagram.
Right.
On Facebook, I'm getting good engagement, and people are actually coming to the website to read the post. So that's good. On my other website, they would never leave Facebook. They would, they wouldn't, actually go to the website, and I wouldn't know that without looking at my stats. So you throw all the mud at the wall and you see what sticks, and then you go pick up that kind of mud and keep throwing that. So, but you've got to know the basics of getting your analytics on the website, and then the very basics of how to read them. And it's pretty simple. You can probably learn the basics in less than an hour. You don't have to build funnels and targets and all that. I don't do any of that. I do none of that. I look at the basics and maybe a little bit more than the basics, and so don't get overwhelmed thinking you have to learn the whole Google Analytics system or whatever your system of choice is. Just look at the basics and just know what you're looking at and see what works.
I'm so glad that you said you don't set up any of those targets or those funnels or anything. I went to a Google Analytics session at a conference once, and it was run by someone who truly loves numbers and actually can see, it's like a second language to them. They look at the numbers and they see what they really mean. They see the story behind them. It's like a beautiful thing to them. So they were really passionate about how to set up all these complicated targets and campaigns and all this stuff. And when you figure this out, this. And I just wanted to cry at the end of it. And and I was like, you know what? I'm like, my goal is to know that if the numbers are higher than they were yesterday, then we're good.
Right, and that's fine for most people. That's fine for me. I look at a little bit more than yesterday. I look at the last several months. I'll compare this month to the same month last year. But I don't get much more than that. You don't have to. And if your goals aren't the same as that egghead that's up there making himself sound smarter by talking about big, fancy, complicated things. And so don't, just because he's an expert doesn't mean you have to do what he's saying you have to do. Do what works for you, and just go a bit at a time. I've got websites, like I said, that generate 10,000 or more visitors per day, generating $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, and I don't do any of that. At some point, maybe I will, and I do more and more analytics and dig a little bit deeper and deeper. I once did a very deep dive using the Six Sigma methodology. If any of you are into manufacturing or work at an aerospace company, I use the Six Sigma methodology to go through my advertising stats very deeply. I did a whole project on my advertising, and I learned a little bit from it. But that was a one-time thing. I learned what I needed to learn. I went did a deep dive. But
so it's not going to be like a monthly thing for you?
No. You don't have to do that. Again, remember, just because somebody says he's an expert or somebody else says that they're an expert doesn't mean you have to do everything they do. Keep your goals in mind. And if your goal is just to have somebody listen and read your blog, then you don't have to do all that complicated stuff. But you do need to know if anybody is coming and reading. So that's step one, and maybe that's all you need. Step one.
Right. I would definitely say that not only do we, stats are important. They are an integral part of your blog, but don't let them intimidate you, and don't let them make you think that your blog isn't as good as it is either. You don't have to have 100,000 visitors every month in order to start to make an income. I know of bloggers that make a full-time income off of 5,000 or 6,000 followers a month because they're in a targeted area and they work on local, and so that's all they need. But what's different about their 5,000 or 6,000 visitors is that they're a very tight-knit community, and they've worked very hard to create that community. So that's the other part of this.
Yeah, fewer very dedicated and devoted readers can be much more valuable than a lot more passerbys and random Google hits. I've got a new customer, a photographer, blogger, that's a photographer, and I'm not sure, she's getting 1,000, a couple thousand hits per month maybe, but her readers love her, and she'll make a post. She made a post yesterday, and it's already got almost 100 comments. I mean, they really engage. I mean, I'm shocked at how much engagement she has, and those kind of that sort of following can be extremely valuable when you start, if you get into for advertising or endorsements or paid tweeting and that sort of thing. So, you know, a small number of great followers can be, or readers can be, as valuable or more valuable than a lot of random who knows who, you know, fly-by-night people just stopping by.
Yeah, I ran a campaign, I don't know, 8 months ago with a small group, and I was actually shocked that the company had approached us and said that they wanted to do it because they knew our numbers and they knew exactly what they were dealing with. And I said, sure. I was really excited that they contacted us. And then, you know, so we set it up and we ran the campaign. And towards the end, I said, you know, I'm like, how's it going? And they said, we're delighted with the numbers. You know, we're delighted with the engagement. We're super happy with the way this has gone. And, you know, I wouldn't say it's one of the most successful, but their ROI, they were very happy with the amount of money that they put into it. They knew exactly what they were getting in, you know, out of it, and they were delighted with the engagement, you know. And so they, you know, the brands know the difference between empty numbers and ones with community behind them. So I would definitely say that, you know, if you're having a hard time finding people to find you, go out there, start creating community with people, start, you know, commenting on other people's blogs, really trying to get the conversation going on your blog, and then that way that can help too. Who is, you know, where are the comments lying? Once you start to get people to consistently comment on your blog, that's another stat that you can follow.
Right. You broke up, and I only got about half of that, but yeah, I think you're right.
Oh, I hope it came through on the tape. Well, we are pretty much out of time. So I think that we are going to go ahead and say thank you for joining us. And remember to measure, 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 but then always bring it back to your original goal. Does that, you know, just because you had a popular post, it might have had something to do with the current news. It could have had to do with a trend. Maybe a celebrity did something funky and skewed your results. So take all of that into consideration before you decide to be the next, you know, zipper blogger when you're really blogging about food. Randy, do you have anything to add?
Nope. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next week.
Great. Bye.